Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Guido. If you are a coach, feel free to go down and subscribe. And today I'm going to share with you exactly two different scenarios that have the same ad spend, the same number of leads, and the same type of leads, but how it can drastically make a difference when you have a different sales process. So, once again, if you're a coach, go down below and subscribe. I basically create content around sales, building sales teams, how to ultimately scale a coaching business to 50K per month. So let's get straight into it. And why am I creating this video? Well, it's just to show you that you could have one thing wrong in your process overall, and it's going to mess up your ads, right? You might actually have really good ads that are working, but because you're not squeezing as much out of them, it feels like they're not, and then you're turning them off. So today I'm going to show you exactly what you can do in order to make sure that the problem is definitely not the ads and it's something else. And then from there, what to do to fix it. Okay, so let me share my screen here and share with you a few things that could be helpful. So these are two different scenarios, okay? And I will encourage you just to focus on this left one first. So the first scenario is um, where you have $2,000 in spend. Okay, you spend $2,000 in, let's say, follower ads on Instagram, right? From that, you get about 1,000 leads. Okay, usually what we want is about a 10% booking rate. Although it's not exactly 10% from leads. It's leads usually are when they come into the inbox specifically, right? So this is 1,000 followers, and then turn into leads, and then turn into calls booked. So let's say 1,000 of these, and then 100 become conversations. Regardless, eventually you have 10 calls booked. From those 10 calls booked, you have a 1% 10% closing rate. And so, and you, on average, you collect 2,000 upfront, right? Even if your program is like 5K, you usually collect about 2,000 upfront. So that's what you collect from this ad spend. And so your ROAS is 1x. So basically, you break even. Now, most people would look at this and be like, well, that's odd. That's not a good ad, obviously, right? It's not working. Clearly, you can see it, right? Like I only got 1x ROAS. And it's not entirely impossible that that's the case, but when I look at these numbers, I can tell right away that that's not the case. That's not the issue. All of these numbers after leads are the ones in the wrong. It's not the spend. Now, if the reason why we cannot book as many calls is because everybody's unqualified, if because the ones that we book don't close is because everybody's unqualified, and then we barely collect any upfront, right? Because they are unqualified, then that could be the ads. But besides that being the case, which is unlikely, it's probably something else. This is what I'll tell you. Most people focus so much on targeting in ads, which can be a factor, of course, but ultimately everybody gets more or less the same leads, right? Let's not even say the leads, let's say the exposure, right? If your ad is decent enough, you will get the same exposure as everybody else that's using your same targeting. The only reason that somebody will squeeze more out of their leads compared to you is because they have a better ad. Of course, that helps always. That has better messaging, but ultimately they have a better sales process, right? They have a process that squeezes as much as possible out of those ads. And so because everybody gets the same batch. They have really bad leads, right? Like 5%, really good leads, which is another 5%. And then they have okay leads, which is 20%. And then they have good leads, which is 20%. And then they have like in the middle, like something that is all right. So, and then bad leads, of course. Everybody gets the same batch, different percentages, a little bit here and there, but ultimately you'll get a bad batch or you'll get a good batch. It's just law of probabilities. So the question is, what do you do with those leads? That's what differentiates a good sales process and a good salesperson. So let's look at now scenario number two compared, right? Same $2,000 spend, okay, that we had originally. And we have also 1,000 leads, right? So still the same. But from those 1,000 leads, we actually book 100 calls instead of 10, right? And again, this is not because the leads are not good. It's just because we maybe did a lot more volume, right? Our speed to reply was a lot higher, meaning like faster, not higher. The quality of our conversations was better, so we were able to connect with people better, and they were able to trust us. Or there's multiple reasons why that might be happening, but ultimately we were able to squeeze 100 booked calls from this. Now, from those 100 booked calls, some of them we canceled and some of them we took, right? But ultimately we closed 10, right? So depending how many show up, let's say 70%, that's like a 1 in 7. So about a 15, 18% closing rate, something around that. um, which is still not amazing, right? But it's better. And so from those 10 closed, if we collect the same 2K up front times 10, that's 20,000 up front, right? And because of that, our ROAS is 10x. So literally the same spend, the same leads, but because everything else is more optimized, we had a 10x ROAS instead of 1x ROAS. So then what happens, right? Like most people, they run ads and they're perhaps not as good as at sales as they could be, or honestly, more, predominantly, they tend to not know how to properly do something and do it the same way every time, right? Like structure it as an SOP. And so because of that, they don't have the same performance every single day. And that is going to affect your ads no matter what. Like you just can't expect things to work if you're not, doing the same things every day, the same way you did when it worked really well. So this is just a simple example, right? But this is what can massively change. So what I would encourage you is before you turn off your ads, ask yourself, look at your numbers always, right? And you need to have a good tracking system for that. But a simple spreadsheet should do. Are the numbers really the KPIs that you're aiming for, right? And if not, what is the problem? Is it really the ads that are giving you leads that are not good? Or is it that you could squeeze a lot more out of it, but you're just not following up enough? You're not getting to people fast enough. And you're not closing, you're not following a good process, or you're getting attached to the call closing, right? All of these things affect your ROAS eventually, right? So now let's say it is your sales process, right? You notice that your spend is good, your leads are good, right? $2 per lead. It's just that you don't know how to maximize this. Well, simple. Simple, not necessarily easy, right? But actually not too complicated. So the first thing you have to do is look at the leads to so this would be followers. You could split it into two: followers to leads, right? So when you're getting followers, are you reaching out to everybody that follows you? Like how fast are you reaching out to them? Right. So you want to increase the speed to reply and how fast you get to those people and start a conversation. Second thing is the quality of those conversations, right? If you're starting with a message that is like, hey, you want to buy something, right? Like that's probably going to turn them off right away, right? Or if you take too long to pitch the call as well, right? They're going to stop replying to you. They're going to ghost you. Or if you pitch too early as well, right? That could also be an issue. So all these things are to consider, right? So I would play around with your script, make sure you have specific questions that you ask every single time in a way that makes sense. But then as soon as you collect enough information to have leverage for the call, you pitch the call and don't waste time, right? And then the other thing is volume, right? If you're not clearing all of your inbox every day, and on top of that doing a bunch of follow-ups, then you're just not doing enough, right? Like you, it's just not enough. And so because of that, you need to be doing more, right? You need to be doing more follow-ups and like up to 100 a day, depending if you have that amount of obviously people to follow up with, of course. And this means both long-term and short-term follow-ups, right? Short-term being within the week and long-term being more than a week or like months even, right? People that you put in your calendar because they told you it would be a better time to have a call like in a month or something like that, right? Assuming you couldn't overcome that. And yeah, ultimately that's also part of the case, which is sometimes people are, everything is laid out. You got the right leverage and everything, but logistically it's hard for them to hop on a call. And so being able to overcome that quickly, right, and efficiently is also a pretty good skill to get to make sure that your pitched to book ratio is also a lot higher, right? It's higher than 50%. Awesome. So that's the first kind of ratio here. The second ratio is between calls booked and calls closed. Now, you want to make sure that you're not taking calls with people that don't have the money. But the only way you can make that decision is if you have a form when people actually book the call and then track your data, right? And see everybody that puts this type of answer on the form ends up not having the money on the call and then cancel those people ruthlessly. Okay. You can always reach out to them in the DMs and qualify them so they're not completely lost, right? Don't feel like you're rude for just canceling, but it's not worth your time, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, well, how prepared are you for the call, right? No, actually, before even you, like how prepared are they for the call? If they're showing up, they have no idea who you are, right? They just barely followed you and they followed you like 2 days ago, they didn't watch anything, they don't know your specific approach, it's going to be much harder to do the call, and it's going to take longer, and it's probably going to become a 2 call close. So it's going to take up another slot in your calendar. Versus if you have them watch a specific video that sells them on you, your story, and your authority, and then also your mechanism and or your vehicle, right? Your approach specifically to their problem. So if you have that video before the call, it tends to convert a lot better. It's really, really good. So that's the thing. So having that in mind, you want to have that video set up so they are ready for the call, right? Also, you want to make sure you're pitching the call properly, because sometimes you can pitch the call, but it almost sounds like a free coaching call, and that's not exactly the frame you want to set. You also don't want to say, "Hey, we're gonna hop on a call so I can pitch you on my program." That's too far off, and you're gonna have a drop in terms of performance. And if people do show up, they're going to show up with a lot of sales resistance, right? Like being closed off, not wanting to give you anything. So what's the medium term? Well, the medium term is to make sure that they're willing to explore their problem deeper on the call. That's all you need to talk about, right? And even on the frame in the beginning of the call, you want to set that frame. Like the first part of the call is to see where you're at, where you're trying to get to see if I can even help, right? So what made you hop on the call? That's all you had to say, right? And eventually it will make sense to kind of lean into the pitch, because there will be a good transition, right? And that ties me into the next thing, that ties into the next thing, which is how you execute the call, right? Obviously the volume, right? The more calls you can book, the better, and how far off they're booked, because that's going to affect closing rate. That's why I also need reminders and making sure so that people show up. But beyond that, once they hop on the call, it's the execution on the call that's going to make a difference as well, right? So following a proven script that doesn't pressure people to buy, right? But instead has them from the inside push themselves into a sale, right? So it comes from internal pressure and not external pressure, and that tends to work really well. So yeah, that's ultimately it in terms of booking calls and taking those calls. And then ultimately, how much you collect up front, that's also a big factor, right? So a lot of people settle for deposits or really long installments, and that's only because they just offer the first thing in their mind, as if somebody says, well, that's a lot of money, right? Well, when somebody gives you that objection, that doesn't necessarily mean they don't have the money. It just means they're intimidated a little bit. So you just have to handle that fear, right? But what you want to aim for is always a paid in full, and only if they really need it do you go into installments to help them, right? As a favor, not as a, yeah, sure, installments work too, right? It's not like a either or option. It's just like, in case of emergency, break the glass, right? They should feel that too. And then once you go into the conversation of like how to break it up so it's a little bit more manageable for them, you want to make sure not to offer anything to them in terms of like, hey, can you do X amount per month? But instead, first ask them how much they have, which is called the open wallet. Basically, they open their wallet and tell you how much money they have. And then from there, you can set up monthly installments. And the reason why we do this is because imagine you're trying to set up a date with somebody, right? Either romantic or business, doesn't matter. So what happens is that you're probably busy. The person is busy, right? So it's going to be really hard to find a date, right? Especially if you're like busy, right? So to find a time that you both can do. And so because of that, instead of saying, hey, can you do Friday 7 p.m. And then the person says no, and then can you do Saturday 2 p.m. and the person says no, can you do Sunday at 11 a.m. and the person says no, and the game just keeps going, and maybe even you go back and forth with each other. That's really inefficient, right? A better way to do it is like, hey, what's your availability? When are you free next week? And the person gives you 4 or 5 times that they could do. And then based on that, you find that you match that with your schedule. And then in one question, you find an answer, right? And it also doesn't feel like the person feels like they have to qualify to you by giving you their time that they have available, which makes it a lot easier, right? As a frame. So it's like basically like a county league, like if you think about it. So same thing with money, right? Like instead of saying, hey, can you do 2,000 per month for 3 months? That can work, like if they do have the money close enough, but a lot of times they might not have that. So it's easier just to ask, okay, so right now after expenses, how much do you have available to potentially invest? Boom, that's it. And then from there, you can just split it up and find something that they tell you right away they can do, instead of you having to guess, right, what their finances are. And I'll leave it at that, because ultimately that's going to help you also collect more upfront, right? Since you're not forcing installments and then, getting to super low installments. And ultimately it will make your ads more profitable. So I hope this was helpful. Let me know in the comments what you think, and I will make more videos of this if it's helpful. So, leave me a comment if that's the case, and subscribe, and have an amazing day. Talk soon.